Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to fling your favorite fishing rod around. And here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance covers your boat and your belongings. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to high-five someone. But not while you're holding your fishing rod. That's a prized possession. So hold on tight with both hands and keep it covered through boat insurance. Get more with Geico.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
I'm Sam Abu Al-Samad.
So, Sam, we have just a couple of things to cover because we're actually back at it on like a regular schedule. So now that I've said that, I've completely jinxed us.
That's right. So it'll be another month before you hear from us again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have the 4th of July.
We can do one next week.
Yeah. Anyway, we're going to talk about what we're driving first. And you know what? I'll switch it up. I'll go first this week.
Okay.
I had a Kia Sorento SXL, which is a really, really solid mid-size family crossover. I continue to be very impressed with it. The SXL is the highest trim, so it has the gaudy chrome wheels and the very nice leather interior that's fragrant, actually. Fragrant leather interior with a diamond perforation pattern.
Do you know how they do those? The fragrance?
Well, I mean, so the smell of leather, classically, the smell of leather is actually the smell of fish oil. But I don't know what automakers are doing. It's probably even less.
My friend Phil Berg actually did a few years back. He did a story about a company that does a lot of the leather for a lot of the different OEMs, and what they actually do is on the underside of the seat, they actually embed. They mount a little thing of some sort of fragrance, and they actually spend a lot of time with each OEM, like for each car line. Figuring out getting the exact right smell that the manufacturer wants for that. And so basically it's like smell-o-vision. There's a little
sorcery.
There's a no sorcery. It's just a little container of some kind of thing with an aroma.
You know what? Okay. I mean, that's fine. I do think that they probably had some issues with the classical leather fragrance once tanning had to become more environmentally friendly.
I mean, once they stopped using chromium in there and all the other nasty stuff that they traditionally used in leather production.
Yeah. And that's why like the semi-aniline and aniline leather is just so coveted because it's dyed all the way through. And to dye a skin all the way through, you've got to use some solvents and penetrants and whatever.
Some nasty stuff.
Yeah. So, okay, well, whatever they did, it smells good inside. The leather is nice to the touch. And, there's a lot of competition for families, mid-sized family crossovers, but the Sorento continues to impress me every time I get in it. First of all, I think it looks really good. The styling team that Hyundai and Kia have working for them, we've said it before, they're so good. So good. I mean, it looks really classy and tasteful. It's not too, I don't like the chrome wheels, but other than that, the shape of the Sorento is clean and well proportioned and just tasteful. And inside it's more of the same. The design is clean and the ergonomics are good. It's easy to operate. Most of the stuff is right where you'd expect it, or it's easy to figure out.
And all the pieces line up properly. And
yeah, they've done a very good job coming up the learning curve. When you think back to 20 years ago, Kias were sort of a punchline.
When Kia was still first coming into the U.S. market in the mid 1990s, they had their first exposure to the U.S. market in the late 80s. When Ford owned a small stake in them and Mazda owned a small stake in them, and they provided they built the original Ford Festiva, which was based on a Mazda design. It was built in Korea by Kia, and then after that you had the Aspire, which was the car for people who someday aspired to own a real car. But then after that, they kind of kind of went their separate ways from Ford and Mazda and started doing their own vehicles and wanted to enter the U.S. market under their own brand. And at that time, those first generation of cars vehicles they did, like the first generation Sportage. Ooh, well, that was a scary car.
Was it? So the Sportage was,
yeah.
I remember when it arrived on the market, it was sort of late in my college career, and it was inexpensive. That's about all it had going for it. It looked good. Overall, I mean, generally, the
2-door was actually kind of cute. The 4-door looked a little weird.
It presented pretty well.
Its proportions were not great.
Yeah. It had a Mazda engine or a Mazda derived engine, if I recall.
Yeah. Derived.
Yeah, derived. They were what you'd expect for a sort of bargain SUV, and SUVs were popular at the time, like traditional SUVs. So it had a niche.
Yeah, I mean, it had a niche, but the company I was working for at the time, we were doing the ABS system for that car, and I drove it, before it went into production, before it was launched on the market. I had some opportunities to drive it, on the track.
Did you roll it?
I did not roll it.
Did you almost roll it?
Amazingly enough, in 17 years, in engineering, I never actually completely rolled over a vehicle. I came very close a couple of times, always with vehicles that were built by Isuzu, but never actually rolled one over completely.
Well, see, I've got a leg up on you. I rolled a Fox body Ford.
How the hell did you do that?
I was 17 and I was flying.
You must have been.
Yeah. It's
Yeah. No, that first generation Sportage was pretty bad.
Well, then they had, what did they have? The Sophia. And
that was what they launched with, the Sophia, which was their little compact car, and the Sportage, and then later they added on the original Sorento and started adding some more bigger cars.
I'm trying to remember what the original Sorento was.
It was actually the first generation Sorento was actually a body on frame. It was not a unibody.
Oh yeah, you know what? I remember that now because I thought it was a really like a throwback to the first generation Ford Explorer is what it felt like to me, because I had one as a press car. Yeah. Maybe there was a couple of generations of Sorento. Either way, Kia has definitely found their groove.
Oh, absolutely.
At this point, it's just a solid vehicle, and I was so sort of surprised by it, which it's like. It's not that big, and we were talking last week about how many 3-row SUVs in the sort of the size class of the Outlander. It's a little bigger than the Outlander, but it's within inches, not feet.
Yeah, it's close. Yeah.
And it has a 3rd row, and I was like, I don't think it has a 3rd row, and it does.
It's even a somewhat usable 3rd row for smaller kids.
Yeah. And so just there are options out there. It's just in this trim, it's really nicely turned out. And I was surprised to find out too that it's one of the few vehicles, I think the few vehicles in its class this year that did pretty well in the new small overlap on the passenger side. So it's not, is it IIHS? I think it's IIHS that does the small overlap.
Yeah, it's IIHS that does. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So when they started doing the small overlap rigid barrier test, they were only doing it on the driver's side, because that's actually the scenario that you're most likely to encounter in the real world. For those that don't know, the small overlap test is instead of running the whole car straight into a solid barrier, then we had the 40% offset barrier test, where you basically hit the car, just left or just to the left of the center line of the car. The small overlap test is only about 20%, or maybe it's 25% overlap.
I think it's 20.
Basically you're hitting it, about where the headlight is, so right in front of the wheel, along the fender line. And that's a really hard test to pass, and do well in, because it's but if you think about it, in the real world, that's kind of the most likely scenario you're actually going to hit, where somebody's kind of drifting over the center line of a 2-lane road, and you just kind of a glancing blow.
Yeah.
So it's actually a very realistic condition, but it's also really hard to manage the energy of that impact. And so when they first started doing it a few years ago, they only did it on the driver's side. And so most manufacturers, did some engineering, added some structure on the driver's side of the car to manage that energy, the flow, the energy flow paths through the structure. But now this year, IHS started doing it on the passenger side as well. And there's a few vehicles that do okay on that, but a lot of them still are doing pretty bad. And as you say, the Sorento was one that actually did pretty well.
Yeah, I think it's the only vehicle in its class that has the top safety pick plus this year. So when you're considering this kind of vehicle, you're going to put your loved ones in it. That's an important selling point. So I was impressed by that. And, I didn't even think that with the earlier small overlap test, it didn't make sense to me. And I mean, it does economically when you think about, what manufacturers need to concern themselves with, that they would do it asymmetrically. So they're not going to beef up both sides when it just has to do well on the test on one side. But it seems a little crappy to me too.
That's one of those unfortunate cases, where, it's, kind of teaching to the test.
Yeah.
You set a standard, and, the manufacturers will optimize to that standard, in part because they're trying to minimize adding extra weight and extra cost to the vehicle. But increasingly manufacturers are starting to deploy the same structural changes on both sides of the car, like the 2019 Dodge Ram. Sorry, I keep wanting to say Dodge Ram. The 2019 Ram 1500. That the frame of that one actually has been reinforced on both the driver and the passenger side. So they did do the changes to address the small overlap test for both sides of the truck.
And I guess to me, it's a little strange that they're even that responsive to the IIHS tests, because they're just like an insurance sort of think tank. They're not really, they don't make policy. They could help shape policy.
They don't make policy, but there's a couple of factors. One, there's a significant marketing thing, to being able to, claim, especially for family type vehicles, to be able to claim that you got a top safety pick plus, that is actually something that consumers look for, is ratings like that, and 5-star NHTSA crash ratings.
Yeah, that's true.
So, if they can get those, manufacturers like to get those awards, and, they'll crowbar them in the advertising. And, the other factor is, especially for IHS, it does factor into the insurance premiums that, when insurance companies are, calculating, the cost for, or the premiums for like collision coverage, and other factors, they do take a look at, how they did and how the vehicles do in the crash tests. And vehicles that do poorly in the crash tests tend to have higher insurance premiums. And, so for the manufacturers, they're, for customers, that might be looking at, the total cost of ownership, they might be able to get a particular model cheaper, but if the insurance rates are going to be much higher on it, then that's going to tend to drive people away from it. So, it helps in other ways as well. So there are some good, business reasons for actually doing that.
Yeah. Well, I don't mean to spend too much time talking about a really kind of a narrow facet of the Sorento, but that was an impressive thing that I uncovered, especially with vehicles you'd think would do well on that test, such as the Ford Explorer and the Jeep Grand Cherokee, two pretty solid sellers in that class, both scoring at the bottom of the class. And part of that, I think, is because that selective reinforcement, where they passed okay on the driver's side, but not on the passenger side, which was added in this year. And the surprising thing to me with that was the Ford Explorer is based on the original Volvo XC90, which was one of the very few vehicles when the small overlap was introduced in 2012 that actually didn't get clobbered by it. So that was just a thoroughly engineered safety design from the beginning. So when they Forded that, something must have changed. The Grand Cherokee, like it's a little disappointing. But on a sort of like I'm personally invested in that vehicle, but I mean I guess I understand too. This is don't hit stuff, and they're going to continue to get safer. So I'm glad that this test is out there. I was talking with another auto writer who doesn't put as much stock in the small overlap tests and stuff, and said, "Oh, they're stupid tests." I was like, I don't know. That's what people do. You almost miss stuff instead of like the full head on or whatever. Like just it is a thing that maybe is worthwhile to make sure that the cars don't hurt us when they could be engineered. And I don't want to say easily engineered, but they could be engineered to dissipate that energy. So. It's like fuel economy. It's like, continue making those better. Like just continue incremental improvements. That we all benefit from that. But in terms of what else is out there in the midsize family crossover pseudo SUV kind of class, there's a lot of choice. The Sorento is one that I think is really worth anybody's while to look at. If you're shopping, I'm trying to think of like the usual suspects, right? You're going to look at the Pilot. You're going to look at the Highlander. You're probably going to look at the Edge and the Terrain, or the Equinox. There's a ton of choices.
Blazer.
Yeah, exactly. The Sorento is one that I think if any of those are on your list, go look at the Sorento too. Partially because it's just nice to operate. It's an easy to use vehicle, which is getting increasingly rare. And it's not like you miss out on any of the tech. It's all available, and it's pretty, again, it's pretty well thought out. So it's easy to use even when it's teched up. Unlike some of the others that once you start adding crap to it, it gets real sort of complex. And it goes down the road well. So all of those factors, like from the car guy side of things, as well as I'm an auto writer, I've seen all of these jaded perspective. Like the Sorento, I like it. I'm impressed by it. So I've babbled enough. What are you driving?
I have the new Ford EcoSport, which finally went on sale in January of this year, and went on sale I think in mid or late January. And as they've been gradually getting all the dealers stocked up, it's actually been selling pretty well. It's been selling, I think the last couple of months it's sold about 5,500 each month. And so the EcoSport is Ford's first stab at a B segment, a small subcompact crossover for the North American market. This is actually the second generation EcoSport, or depending, if you count the mid-cycle, the major refresh they did, maybe the third, but at least the second major generation of EcoSport globally. But it's never been available in North America before. It's built in India. It was designed, initially primarily for the Indian market and for other developing markets, particularly South America. It's always been popular down there as well. They launched it in Europe a couple of years ago, and the Europeans didn't take too kindly to it at first. They didn't think it was refined enough. And so Ford did a quick refresh on that for the European market. And those changes have also been incorporated for the U.S. market version.
So it has continental manners now?
More continental manners. Well, for example, one of the things that they changed, particularly when they brought it into Europe, or when they did the quick update after they launched it in Europe, was the location of the spare tire. Originally the spare tire was mounted on the tailgate. It was on the back of the excuse me. It was mounted on the back of the tailgate, and European customers didn't like that, so they moved it underneath the cargo floor. Went to a mini spare under the cargo floor. And one of the things that's unusual about the the EcoSport compared to most of the vehicles in this class, and in fact most crossovers, is it's actually got a side hinge tailgate. So the tailgate is hinged on the left rather than being top hinged, which, given the height of the thing, when you stand back from the EcoSport and look at it, it actually looks fairly tall because of its proportions, because it's pretty short overall, and has a fairly short wheelbase, and so it looks kind of taller than it is until you walk up to it. I'm 5'11", and the roof of the EcoSport just comes up to barely comes up to my shoulder height. So it's actually not really that tall when you get up close to it. So doing a top hinged tailgate on that might actually be a little bit problematic. Just because of the height, you'd have to it'd have to go up pretty high to so you can get underneath it. But so it's hinged on the side, which is a little unusual. And then, for the North American launch, they did a completely new interior for it, as part of this mid-cycle refresh they did. So it's one of the first Ford vehicles in North America to, kind of adopt this new approach of having the main infotainment screen, kind of standing up on top of the dash, and kind of like a tablet, like we're seeing on most new vehicles now. And the powertrains, they've got two engines available for North America. One is the 1 liter 3-cylinder EcoBoost, which is a pretty nice little engine.
I really like that engine. Yeah. Unfortunately,
you can only get that one with the front wheel drive EcoSport. So if you want all-wheel drive, you have to get the same 2-liter naturally aspirated engine that we've had in the Focus for the last 5 years, which is it's a fine engine. It's there's nothing wrong with it. It's not terribly torquey. And the EcoSport's a little heavier than the Focus was. So doesn't have the most sparkling performance, but it does okay. And they, instead of the dual clutch, the much unloved dual clutch transmission that they've had in the Fiesta and the Focus for the last 6 or 7 years, they went back to a normal planetary gear 6-speed automatic. So the transmission works nicely. It's nice and smooth. You don't really notice the shifts. Under hard acceleration, you get some roar from the engine, but it's not too terribly bad. It's not the most sophisticated sounding, but for the price point, it's fine. Overall, it works okay. It's fairly, it's compact. It's easy to park, because it's so small. It's actually based on the Fiesta platform. And back in 2012 or so, 2011, 2012, when they were developing this generation of it, there were actually quite a few mules running around southeast Michigan here, because they were doing a lot of the development here in Dearborn. And so you'd see if you're driving around here, you'd see these high riding Fiestas. You had Fiesta bodies sitting up, several inches taller than a normal one, with some extended wheel arches. Those were the development mules for the EcoSport, the second generation EcoSport. And so if you're looking for a compact crossover, or a subcompact crossover, I would say it's it's fairly competitive with most of the segment. I think the driving dynamics are not as good as like the Mazda CX-3, but it does have a little more room than the CX-3. The cup holders are actually accessible instead of being underneath the armrest that you fold down. Although they've changed that on the 2019 CX-3, so that's not a problem there anyway. I think in terms of interior packaging, the space you have available, the back seat's a little tight on the EcoSport. It's better than the Mazda, but nowhere near as good as the Honda HR-V. Unfortunately, the Honda HR-V has not great powertrain combination. It has the 1.8, the old 1.8 liter from the previous generation Civic, and a CVT, and it was really disappointing. So it's like there's not really a perfect combination in here. Actually, probably the best the best combination I've driven out of all these subcompact crossovers so far is actually I would say probably the Fiat 500X. It's kind of cool looking. It drives well. Has a nice powertrain. It's got a good combination of room and packaging.
Is the 500X is in the same class? It feels bigger.
No, it's not.
I really like the 500X. I think it's a good overall compromise, like you said.
And of course, as good as it is, it's also probably one of the slowest selling models in the segment.
Oh yeah, you can get one of those for a song.
Yeah, well, the 500X is mechanically the same as the Jeep Renegade. And the Renegade sells like hotcakes, and they can't give away 500Xs.
Well, that's good though, because the Renegade is not as good as the 500X, in my opinion. I know that it's like the same thing, but for whatever intangible reason, because you can get the 500X cheaper.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Not paying the Jeep tax, and you get the vehicle that it looks better. I don't like the way the Renegade looks. It's just more pleasing to be in and to drive. The Renegade is a little bit overly kitschy. When I was going to ask you sort of where the EcoSport fits in.
I'd say the EcoSport is kind of middle of the pack. It's not the best. It's not the worst. I think most of them, they have some. There's some kind of compromise with almost all of them. Whether it's packaging or powertrain or whatever. And I think this one's got a reasonably good balance of everything. It's not the tightest rear seat. It's not the smallest cargo area. It's a decent looking little vehicle. It's kind of cute looking. And it rides reasonably well. The powertrain is not totally offensive. Fuel economy wasn't great. The one I have is the top of the line SES model with the 2-liter and all-wheel drive and sunroof and everything. And I've averaged about 25 and a half over the past week. So, it's okay. It's not great. There's others that do better. But it's decent. It's a decent vehicle. And if you're looking for a crossover in this segment, these smaller crossovers, it's a reasonable option.
I don't know that that's what Ford was looking for.
No,
I was like, well, hey, we gave you a reasonable option.
I think, I think they recognized that, this was not going to be a fully optimized vehicle, because the original plan was this vehicle was never supposed to come to North America. When they launched it in about, this generation in about 2014, there was never any intention to bring it to North America. And, at that point, the subcompact crossover segment, was still, nascent, it really hadn't taken off yet. And, so I give credit to Ford for reacting, to changes in the marketplace. They realized, okay, we've got something that could do reasonably well in this segment, that's growing really fast. And, so let's scramble and get it federalized so we can bring it to the U.S. market. So they have something in the marketplace, and I think, what we have today really is something that's an interim thing. I think, as we see it today, we're probably only going to have this vehicle for another 2 or 3 years, probably 3 years, because, they're revamping everything, especially all their utilities over the next couple of years. And, there will be other small utilities coming to the Ford lineup in the next couple of years, that, I think will probably be better suited to the U.S. market and just to the market in general, and I think there'll be better vehicles, and so this kind of tides them over until the next round of vehicles arrives.
Well, now that they've launched the EcoSport name too, the next one they bring is going to be they're either going to have to call it EcoSport, which they probably should now that they've invested in it.
Don't count on that. I mean, I know, especially American car makers. They'll drop names, at the drop of a hat.
They'll come up with some perfume name, as Bob Lutz calls it, for it.
Although, given that this EcoSport is selling pretty well, if it maintains its sales pace, they may well keep that brand.
Who's it selling to? Like, have they broken it out?
I don't know. I haven't seen any demographic information yet. Kind of who's buying them. In general, kind of the B segment crossovers. A lot of them are selling to younger customers. To a lot of them to millennials who are. They're going. Because a lot of these vehicles are relatively affordable. Especially and they make decent urban vehicles because they don't have a huge footprint. So you get, some of the packaging advantages of a utility. It makes a decent lifestyle vehicle, but it's also easy enough to manage in an urban environment. You can park it relatively easily. You can maneuver it around, congested streets. So, I think, a lot of younger customers are going for them, but also, a lot of empty nesters are also going for smaller utilities, either B or C segment. So, thinking vehicles like the EcoSport and also the Focus, which is one size class up from the EcoSport, are increasingly popular among more mature customers. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, well, in both of those, I think both of those use cases make sense. I just didn't know if Mr. and Mrs. Hertz or the Enterprise family were purchasing some as well.
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think they're purchasing huge numbers of them. I could, frankly, I think, fewer and fewer people are actually renting cars anyway. That's a whole other issue. The car rental business is really struggling.
I didn't think of that.
A lot of, increasingly, when people travel, instead of renting a car, they're taking using their ride hailing apps, to get around, especially if they don't need to they don't need to drive around a lot. They're using other options.
Well, the car rental industry has a friend in me because I don't want to get in a car that somebody else is driving. I've refused to use Uber, and yeah. So there's that. Yeah, all right. So I get the impression that you had a, I don't know. I guess like the lack of like over superlatives makes me think that Ford hit a solid solid hit up the middle with it, but it's not not a knockout.
I was not overwhelmed, but I wasn't underwhelmed either. It's kind of like the Outlander plug-in last week. It's fine. It does what it's meant to do, and it does it at a pretty reasonable price. The base price for the front wheel drive EcoSport starts at just under $20,000. A fully loaded SES, takes you up to about 27. That's about the most you can spend on it. And I think, the one I had, was about 26 or something.
Well, that's not too bad. To me, everything's just gotten ridiculously expensive in the last 10 years. So clearly,
and that's true. It doesn't. This one, the one I had, has a 8-inch touchscreen in there with Sync 3. It has built-in nav. If you've got Sync 3, and you've got a smartphone, you can use, Apple Maps or Google Maps or Waze anyway. So you don't really need those options. You don't really need the built-in nav, but it's got built-in nav. It's got blind spot monitoring and a backup camera. It doesn't have lane keeping or adaptive cruise control, but it does have a lot of other features in it.
Yeah, well, like that stuff is easy for them to add too. Like if at a certain point they feel like it needs to have adaptive cruise, and I'm sure that they can. I'm sure.
Yeah, I doubt that they'll add adaptive cruise for this generation, just because I think this is going to be a fairly short model cycle for this particular generation. I think we'll see that in the next one, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them add camera-based forward collision warning and automatic emergency braking. Probably maybe even for 2019 models. Certainly by the 2020 models at the latest.
All right. Well, maybe by then it'll wow you a little bit more. To me, it's a funky little car that I don't know that it stands out enough. So I feel kind of bad.
I mean, that is an issue. It is an increasingly crowded segment.
Yeah.
And now, we also have Nissan's got its new kicks coming into this segment.
I love that. That's the
Hyundai Kona. Oh, I forgot to mention the Kona. The Kona is another one that, it has, an interesting style.
Yeah, I really like the Kona. I
think it's pretty cool looking, especially in certain colors. I think it works pretty well, and it drives really well. And I think the Kona, I prefer the powertrain in the Kona. You have a 2-liter, you have Hyundai's 2-liter DI 4-cylinder, and you also have the optional 1.6-liter turbo.
That 1.6 turbo is a great engine. Yeah,
well, they have several versions of it. The version in the Kona, I think, is about 175 horsepower. But even that one, I think it's a much better powertrain than the 2-liter that's in the Focus or in the EcoSport. So I think that is one. The Kona and the 500X are actually probably the two I would most recommend people take a look at in this segment.
Yeah, well, I mean, Ford in terms of powertrains too. Like, you go to market with the engines you've got too. Like, they don't seem to have anything that's under in a 4-cylinder. They don't have a smaller 4-cylinder than 2-liter, do they?
They have a 1.5 turbo that's in the that's the standard engine in the Fusion now.
Oh, is it?
It had that engine for several years. Yeah.
Clearly, I haven't been paying attention.
Neither is anybody else. So
yeah,
not alone.
The Fusion. We're like, oh yeah, the Fusion that exists for now.
It's a product in our lineup.
Yeah.
Actually, the Fusion's not going away anytime soon. Even though they announced that they're no longer developing most of the cars for their North American lineup, the Fusion's actually going to stay in production for probably at least another 3 or 4 years.
Well, they've got, it's a police car now, right? Like, that's one of the reasons.
they've launched a police car version. And they've simplified the lineup. They've got it down to about 3 dozen buildable combinations now, of options. And they'll keep tweaking it. Do a little something every year for another 3 or 4 years, and then depending on what happens to the market, they'll either replace it with something else, or it'll just quietly fade away like the Taurus has. You remember the Taurus, don't you?
Yeah. Do they still offer that, or I know there was supposed to be like sort of.
Yeah, production of Taurus is, I believe. I'm trying to remember what the schedule was. Taurus production should be finished now in Chicago, because they're switching that plant over, or maybe sometime in the next couple. If it hasn't stopped, it'll be sometime in the next couple of months. Taurus production will end as they shift over and retool that plant to do the next generation Explorer and the Lincoln Aviator.
Those are two that I'm actually interested in. The Taurus. The Taurus has this problem that it's not unique to Ford, but Ford has had this pattern, especially with big cars, where they just let them sit around and they don't update them. So the Taurus hasn't really been updated since
2010.
Yeah. Well, when did it get the latest style? Is that when it got its last styling? They
did a mid-cycle update in 2013, I think, when it got the new grille, the hexagonal grille.
Well, yeah, but I thought it also, like, that was a big change. So let's see. It launched in, we're going to go back now. It launched in 2005 as the 500. And then that was around until 2008, right? When they introduced the Taurus with the new front end styling, new interior, and 3.5 liter V6 and 6-speed auto versus the 3 liter and the CVT. I think it was either 07 or 08.
It was for 2008 model year.
Okay.
And then 2 years later, for 2010 model year, they completely redid the body. They dropped the Mercury Montego.
Right.
They completely redid the body of the Taurus and gave it the shape that it has today.
Holy crap. It's that old? It's 8 years old?
Yeah.
Wow.
Like I say, it got a refresh in 2013.
Yeah.
When
not
it got
a big one.
New front fascia. But, it didn't fundamentally change the the design of the car.
Well, and so part of the problem that they had was when they went from the sort of 500 body shell to the current body shell, it actually got smaller. And so less space efficient.
Yeah.
It lost headroom. It got less easy to use. Like all the benefits of having a car that big were sort of wiped away by the styling. And now that they haven't done anything to it for 8 years, you know, like, yeah,
it's
people are going to forget
now.
Yeah. So think about that. Like another car, we can use this to pivot into our topic. So that's a good pivot, even though I have more to say about Ford. But okay. So another car that launched in 2005, where it was the Dodge Charger, the LX platform Chryslers, launched in 2005.
Actually, the Charger didn't come along till a couple of years later, because remember they launched with the 300.
It was the 300 and the Magnum. Okay, so the Charger came after. I thought it was 300 Magnum Charger altogether.
No, the Charger came, I think, in 2007.
Okay,
it was about 2 years after the 300 and Magnum launched.
Well, either way, that platform, which was not new, it was very much the same as like a parallel path as Ford took with the Taurus, taking that Volvo platform from the 90s and redoing it. Chrysler did very much the same. They took what they could. It's sort of Daimler Chrysler joint effort, and so they used some Daimler here, some Chrysler there, and made the LX cars, which are still with us. The difference is they haven't stopped tinkering with the LX cars, and they continue to sell.
They're still fundamentally the same as they were, 15 years ago. But they have just kept tweaking them every year. Every couple of years they do, some styling refresh. Almost every year they do some, add something to, add some tech piece to it. They keep tweaking the engines, especially on the Dodge side. 4 years ago now, they launched the Hellcat.
Yeah.
In the Challenger, and then they added it to the Charger as well. So 707 horsepower. And they've kept fiddling with that thing. Last year they cranked it up again and introduced the Challenger Demon, which took it to 840 horsepower and made it the first production car ever that could do wheelies, on the drag strip. Because it had enough torque. Along with the engine, they had took the 6.2 liter Hemi V8. They put a bigger supercharger on it. They did a bunch of other. They put they upgraded the fuel system to deliver enough fuel to make that much power, because they couldn't get enough fuel flow from the original system. So they put in dual fuel pumps in order to get enough to pump enough gasoline into this thing to make that power. They added a drag pack, a drag mode to the electronics, upgraded a bunch of the other hardware to support the load of drag racing. Because this, even though it is technically a street legal car, it's built for the drag strip. The Demon was, if Ford did a street legal version of the Cobra Jet, it would be like the Demon. But Ford has never done a street legal Cobra Jet. Those have always been track only cars. So the Demon, was a limited production model, 840 horsepower. They built 3,300 of them, 3,000 for the U.S. market, 300 for Canada. Just last week, they actually auctioned off as a pair the very last Viper and the final Demon at an auction in New England, where the pair of those cars went for $1 million, and all the proceeds went to the United Way. They were given to charity by FCA. And so now for 2018 model, they have taken most of the best of the Demon, and they've created the Challenger Hellcat Redeye.
Right, and this because you were at the FCA What's New presentation today. So
I was there. I saw the Redeye. It, for the most part, looks very much like the Demon. It's got the wide body pack, although you can actually get it with the narrow body as well. So with the standard Challenger body, or you can get the wide body version with the 3.5 inches wider wheel arches, to cover up bigger wheels and tires. And essentially it has all the Challengers for 2018 or 2019 get a new dual snorkel hood. So it's a redesigned hood. Excuse me. And then the Redeye basically gets the Demon engine, which has a 2.7 liter blower instead of the 2.4 liter that's on the regular Hellcat.
That's so much air.
It is. But in the Redeye, it only puts out a mere 797 horsepower and 707 foot-pounds of torque. Because without that, full width hood scoop that's on the Demon, it can't suck in quite enough air to get all the way up to 840 horsepower. So that's basically the limiting factor, which means that what we're going to see is once the Demons go on sale, we're going to see people basically buy, or once the Redeyes go on sale, they're going to buy Redeyes and they'll put an aftermarket hood on them and basically turn them into Demons.
Yeah.
They'll add the other components that are missing from the Demon and turn them into Demons and take them to the drag strip.
Ford, see what you could have done with your Taurus. I don't know how you'd do it with that platform. There's no way it would support what Dodge has done, but
there's certainly things you could do to make it, remain more or less relevant.
Yeah, and they didn't do that. And it's the same sort of pattern that happened with the Crown Victoria. Was like at a certain point they stopped trying, and they were just like, yeah, we make the thing, like it sells X amount, and I think the Taurus
agencies buy 50,000 of them a year, and
the Taurus is the Interceptor.
We make a 50% profit margin on them, and
right. And a lot of departments, I think, actually, what's really signed the death warrant for the Taurus is when they have the utility. They have the Explorer police vehicle. I don't even.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. When they launched the Taurus as a police car, they launched a version based on the Explorer as well at the same time, and the Explorer the police Explorer outsells the Taurus by I think about 4 to 1 or 5 to 1.
Yeah. Well, okay. I mean, crazy. You think about all the stuff in a cop car, like it makes
exactly.
More sense.
That's why modern police patrol vehicles, they've got to carry all kinds of radio equipment and emergency equipment in the back, and right. One of the issues with the Taurus, just as when they originally launched the Charger as a police car, the reason why it didn't do better than it did, even though it vastly outperformed the Crown Vic. The Crown Vic kept outselling the Charger because the trunk space was not as good.
Yeah.
And it was harder to get all the equipment they needed, to handle all the stuff they needed to do with a Charger versus the Crown Vic. And, now when you compare the Taurus to the Explorer, you have the same problem. And that's exactly why, for 2019, FCA has launched the police version of the Durango to compete directly with the Explorer.
There's another one to look out for now. I mean, that makes perfect sense. So yeah, I just wanted to wrap up my sort of tangent about the Taurus. So what else did you see at the FCA?
Steve Beam, who is in charge of passenger cars for Chrysler and Dodge, was there. He actually did the introduction of the Redeye. Oh, by the way, the Redeye goes on sale this fall. They haven't announced final pricing, but it'll be around $70,000.
That's so cheap. For what it is.
Given the performance that you're getting with this thing, 203 mile an hour top speed, quarter mile in I think 10.3 at 131 miles an hour. That's pretty cheap. And there's going to be all kinds of Mopar stuff that you can get to make it even faster. But Steve Beam was asked about at the FCA 5-year plan thing a few weeks back. Dodge and Chrysler weren't mentioned, and so he was asked, so what's the plan for Dodge? And he said, basically, we want to keep Dodge is going to be the performance brand going forward. Every Dodge vehicle is going to have a performance variant, a strong performance variant. And it's more about the muscle cars. So like each of the brands under the FCA umbrella, is going to have their own distinct flavor. So Dodge is, more about the classic American muscle, with cars powered by Hellcats and who knows what else coming down the pipe. And he said there is going to be more product coming, more replacements for some of the existing stuff. But Dodge is going to be all about performance. And yesterday, we saw Alfa Romeo and Maserati, and Tim Kuniskis, who's now in charge of those brands. He talked about what those two brands are. Alfa Romeo is going to be, the pure sports car brand for FCA, so more, more sophisticated high performance vehicles, like the Giulia and the Stelvio and all the other new models that are coming, going to exhibit, same kinds of characteristics. And Maserati is going to be the Grand Touring brand for FCA, so it's their premium brand, Grand Touring cars, cars that are great to drive, but, that get you there, fast, but in a relaxed way. So it's not, the more hardcore stuff you're going to get from Alfa Romeo. And that's why, Maserati is the brand where we're going to see within the FCA umbrella, launching a lot of electrification under that, 4 new battery electric vehicles coming to Maserati over the next 4 years, starting with the Alfieri, which is finally going to replace the Gran Turismo. And I drove the Gran Turismo yesterday. It's the first time I drove a Gran Turismo in 10 years. Last time was when I did a review of one for Autoblog in July of 2008.
Same car.
Same car, except now it has the Uconnect screen in there instead of the really terrible infotainment or nav system that was in that car 10 years ago. But other than that, it's still basically the same car. Still sounds fantastic. It's obviously getting kind of old, kind of long in the tooth, relative to its competition. It's not a terrible car, but it still looks good. It's definitely not up to par for what customers in that segment expect today. But the new Alfieri is going to be available as a plug-in hybrid and as a battery electric version. That whole Grand Touring idea is also why Maserati is where you're going to see the more sophisticated automated driving systems launching within FCA, before they filter down to other models as well. So that's, they haven't said this specifically, but that's probably where you'll see the first applications of a level 4 automated system, where you can basically, completely, tune out of what's going on and just let the car drive you. And that, that'll be for, designed more for long distance trips, things like that, long distance road trips. And that, I think that really fits in with that whole Grand Touring idea.
Am I the only one who sees the irony in a heavily electrified Italian car?
No, that's it's about the same as a heavily electrified English car.
Right. Maybe that joke is tired, but it just strikes me as like, oh, okay. I mean, but like the Alphas we've seen,
from talking to people who drove the Jaguar I-Pace in the last couple of weeks at the media drives in Portugal, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
and I have a feeling that they're going to do some really good stuff. Because, the thing is, while FCA has not been a particularly strong proponent of electrification, that's been more from a business standpoint, not necessarily from a technology standpoint. The Fiat 500e is actually a really good little car, a really good little EV. And I think it's actually the most fun version of the 500 to drive. It's just, they lose a ton of money on every one of them.
Yeah. And I think that holds true. It's like driving the EVs and actually cars that are, they gain an EV version, generally they're okay. It's just the heart isn't in it for some of these automakers. So they're kind of getting dragged kicking and screaming into it. And
this is why, what we're seeing now, in this new plan is, FCA, kind of taking a similar approach to what, the German premium brands are doing with targeting electrification, not so much purely, not trying to get the customers that, that want to be green, but rather, positioning it as a performance enhancer.
Well, yeah, because those green people are cheapskates.
Right.
They don't want to buy anything, but the performance people on the other hand will pay.
Yeah, and if you can take a plug-in hybrid and rather than, set up the performance level so that it's comparable to your baseline car, but is a lot more efficient, kind of put it, as a step up that's, much better performance. Oh, and it's also significantly more efficient. Maybe not the maximum efficiency you could get out of the system like that, but much more than you get from the standard system. And when you do it that way, you can charge a much higher price point for it. Those customers will pay a premium to get that performance enhancement, and that covers the extra cost of the system.
Yeah. And it's interesting too to note like where everybody is with the what is it, the tax credits, the $7,500 credit. Like there's been enough cars sold that some of those are actually nearly exhausted for particular models.
Yeah, I mean, Tesla's about to start their phase out on that.
Yeah. Ford's not far behind either. Like the Fusion, I think the Fusion's sold enough.
Ford will probably hit it probably in Q4 of this year. GM probably sometime later in third quarter.
So yeah, it's kind of like, what are they going to do when that hits? I don't know what that means for prices, because that's one of the biggest selling points of the EVs.
Well, and this is one of the reasons why, Ford, for the new battery electric crossover that they're launching in 2020 is going to be it's going to be a performance vehicle. It's not going to be a replacement for the Focus Electric. It's going to be a vehicle that is targeted, at Mustang GT buyers. They're going after the Tesla buyers, that want a more premium performance electric vehicle. And so that's why they hinted at possibly calling it the Mach 1 or something similar to that. I think because they know that, they're going to be out, they're definitely going to be out of tax credits at that point. And so, they have to figure out how we're going to sell these things profitably, on their own merits, how we're going to get people to buy these things. And that's one way to do it. Yeah.
So we skipped around a little bit. Did we cover everything about what you picked up at the FCA? What's new? Because you talked with, or you didn't talk about, you were a fly on the wall when Tim Kuniskis was chatting. And we talked about what Steve Beam said, where the brands fit. They talk at all about Chrysler.
Chryslers are still products in their lineup, as Tim Cook would say about the Mac Mini. They didn't really talk about anything new for Chrysler. I think they're starting to gain some traction with the Pacifica plug-in hybrid, especially thanks to Waymo, who are committed to buying a whole bunch of those things. They've ordered up to 62,000 of them. And so they will probably be the primary customer for those vehicles over the next couple of years. And they'll probably be buying more than anybody else. So yeah, no, they haven't really talked about it. There's a little bit of hinting that, there might be something else coming from Chrysler, possibly, a crossover on the Pacifica platform. But that's really about it for the Chrysler brand. The 300 is, like the Charger.
It's still there.
It's still there. They're still selling them. They're still making money on them. They're still tweaking them. There's no Hellcat in the 300, but you can get the 6.4 liter Hemi naturally aspirated, in the SRT, which is still plenty. You're talking 450 horsepower, I think, in that one. So there's plenty of performance to be had in the 300 as well. And they keep tweaking those and, adding some driver assist features and things like that. The things that the market is expecting. And they'll just keep doing that. The one other thing that I think was somewhat noteworthy today, I had a chance to spend a little bit of time in the 2-liter Jeep Wrangler.
How was that?
Which is just now finally going on sale. So that's the 2-liter 48-volt mild hybrid. Is good. You really don't feel the system at all. You don't really notice at all, that there's anything unusual about it. And it's got plenty of performance. It's plenty quick. I had a chance to drive it on the off-road course, and one thing that's interesting, about driving a Jeep, especially a Wrangler off-road, when they say 4-wheel drive low, they mean low.
Yeah. Well, it's like it's like a 27-to-1 reduction.
Yeah. So just to give you an idea of what that really means, though, in third gear, at 13 miles an hour, it was spinning 5,000 RPM. At 13 miles an hour in third gear.
I mean, you need that kind of precision when you're crawling.
Yeah. No, I mean, when you're going through the really rough stuff, you want that kind of really precise control. And in fact, they did some extra work on the new Wrangler, the JL Wrangler, on the control of the the accelerator, and how it responds when you're in 4-wheel drive low, to give you that extra level of precision, so you can control your speed in all those different conditions. And it works really well. Yeah, it goes anywhere.
Nobody got stuck.
Nobody got stuck. They had all the Jeeps out there on the off-road course. From the Renegade all the way through the Wrangler, the Grand Cherokee, the Compass, the regular Cherokee. When Jeep puts a Trailhawk badge on one of their vehicles, I mean, you may complain about the idea of front wheel drive unibody crossovers with a Jeep badge, but and the reality is most people buy the more mundane versions and just drive them around town. But if you get a Trailhawk version, and you can get Trailhawk versions of every Jeep, if you get one with a Trailhawk badge on it, that sucker will go pretty much anywhere. I mean, there's places, there's places where only a Wrangler will go that none of the others will be able to tackle. But on pretty much anything any normal human being is likely to encounter, a Trailhawk Jeep is going to get you where you need to go.
Yeah, well, that thing way back with the first Patriots was if you equipped it properly, it would leave a lot of more serious rigs in the dust off-road. And that was because there's no reason why an off-road vehicle has to be like a traditional Jeep. It can be unibody, it can be front-wheel drive based. It's how it's designed to handle the terrain when you put it in that 4-wheel drive mode. And those littler Jeeps, the car-based Jeeps, they still have 2-speed transfer cases, and you can lock the 4-wheel drive system when you equip them properly. And like you say in Trailhawk,
when you get the Trailhawk versions, they're the all-wheel drive, the 4-wheel drive systems they put on there, they all have 4-wheel low locking differentials, available, and all this stuff. And you just put it in those modes, and it just goes wherever you point it. Yeah,
that's why we like them here in New England. Because they go wherever you point them in the snow until they don't. And then they go wherever the hell they want because you had the wrong tires.
Well, that's obviously, an important component. You got to have the right tires on there. But the other thing I drove on that same off-road course with the Jeeps is the new Ram 1500 Rebel, and also the 2500 Power Wagon. And those things can do, go pretty much, almost wherever the Wrangler can go, but just through sheer brute force.
Yeah. Well, and the Rebel too, because they're still selling right now the 2018 Rebel, right? Like the only.
No, I don't think you can get the 2018 Rebel anymore.
Oh, has it flipped now to only because the last time I looked, the only 19 truck you could get was the 1500, and so like those special trims or still the?
Well, I mean, I mean, they had the Rebel is always on the 50, it's always a 1500. It's not a heavy duty.
Right, but I mean, they didn't offer a 2019 Rebel the last time I looked. It's been a little while, so
no,
it's like coming soon.
Okay, well, I mean, when I did the drive in Arizona in March, they had Rebels there, and I drove them again today.
Oh yeah,
different environment.
I'm thinking.
And the thing about the Rebel this time, last time it was only available with one engine, with the V8 engine, or maybe it was a V6 actually. I think it was the Pentastar last time. This time you'll be able to get it with all of the engine options. So you'll be able to get it with the Pentastar, the 5.7 liter Hemi, or the new diesel will be available with the Rebel.
So it's not like, as much as we've sounded the sort of death knell for Chrysler and or FCA, all the brands, it sounds like there's still stuff going on, and they're going to be a viable automaker for at least a little while longer. Yeah,
I mean, we're not going to have an overnight transition to shared autonomous vehicles. So, and even when that does happen, I think FCA's still got a plan to at least keep selling Pacifica hybrids to Waymo and Voyage and anybody else that wants a good platform for a robotaxi.
Yeah, and look, I mean, they've already got nostalgic cars. So when we're all nostalgic for cars, when we're getting driven around in the mandated pods, they'll be right in there. One of the things that could really affect not just FCA but everybody, and that's sort of been another kind of topic over the last couple of weeks, are the sort of the tariffs that are either proposed or going into effect already, where all the automakers and basically any real big manufacturing concern in the U.S. is pretty worried to the point where Harley Davidson has said that we're going to move production over to Europe, which has caused a big kerfuffle. But at the end of the day, they answer to their shareholders first.
Yeah, I mean, for Harley, it's a matter of if we impose tariffs, on other countries, they're immediately going to respond with similar tariffs on our products, and it becomes this escalating thing. If the people doing it are idiots, it just keeps escalating.
Well, and that's like it's the whole. Go ahead.
And so if that happens, if Europe puts big tariffs on American products, the only way that an American company can viably sell products over there is to build them over there.
Right, just at a time when all the American brands have wound down their European arms.
I mean, GM did.
Yeah, but Ford doesn't really have a huge presence over.
Yeah, they do.
Do they still? Okay.
Yeah, they've still got a big presence there.
Yeah, GM is kind of quietly like leaving everywhere. They're selling off their operation in Vietnam, and Australia, they sort of blinked out, and they're not, they sold everything off to PSA.
Yeah. Harley Davidson's not the only company, that is responding to these tariffs. Toyota came out a few days ago and said, we did the calculations, and, based on the tariffs that the administration wants to impose, the cost of a new Camry would increase by $1,800 overnight. And, that's insane. When an $1,800 increase, without adding anything to it, I mean, it's just, to pay these tariffs on some of the parts that come in. And the Camry, has for many years now been it has the highest American parts content of anything built here.
Well, that's
all the Camrys are built here in the U.S. They're built in Georgetown, Kentucky, and in a couple of other plants. Virtually all the Camrys that Toyota sells here are built here by American employees. Using mostly parts coming from American parts plants. But there's enough imported materials coming in, in steel and aluminum mainly, that it would raise the price of the cars by $1,800.
I'm surprised it's not more. And it maybe this is just the first step. And given what else happens,
I think the only reason why it's as low as it is I think it's mainly just on those raw materials that are being brought in to make some of the parts, because like I said, most of those parts are actually being built by suppliers here in the U.S. By companies like Denso and others that have factories in this country built and shipping parts to Toyota, to Toyota's factories here. And we've also heard from some of those suppliers, the new CEO of ZF, is calling on negotiators to reach an agreement, trying to prevent a trade war, because this is going to be a significant threat to their business. You were mentioning earlier the CEO of a Canadian supplier called Linamar. Yeah. Is similar position. That this is going to be a major problem, and there's estimates that if all these tariffs go into effect, it could ultimately cost over 600,000 jobs in the U.S.
Right. And I don't think that's hyperbole. I think that there's a lot of short-sightedness and actual ignorance. I've seen commentary like people don't understand that BMWs and Mercedes are built here, and they also don't understand that the reason why you've got Toyota in Texas building pickup trucks and Nissan in Tennessee doing the same. I think they build them in Tennessee. But they have an engine plant there too. Like those things are here because of our tariffs.
Nissan's Smyrna assembly plant is actually the highest volume assembly plant in North America.
Really?
It has a capacity of over 600,000 vehicles a year. It's the biggest in North America.
That's crazy. Like, what do you think is going to happen? So that's just the steel and aluminum tariffs, which, if we're going to do those tariffs on steel and aluminum, Canada is going to respond to protect themselves, because it's sort of the first knee-jerk reaction for any of those. And it is a problem.
Emphasis on the word jerk.
Right. I understand that dumping is a problem, and that overproduction and other, especially from China, is an issue. But
you know something? You know who dumps? Everybody does.
Yes, of course. And the blunt force way around it is just, we'll see how it works out, but everybody's a little bit on edge. And I think, rightfully so, because, Canada has to move to protect itself so that these, other suppliers in China aren't dumping into Canada as a way to bring it into the US. Like there's a whole lot of ins and outs here, but yeah, I think what's her name, Linda Hasenfratz, who, like you said, she's the CEO of Linamar. Her take on it is that the tariffs are the final step to economic disaster, and I don't think that that's hyperbole. I do think that manufacturing has a big footprint in the U.S., and the auto manufacturers feel it maybe the most acutely, but think of everything else that is still made here. There is still a lot of manufacturing in the US, and it's a lot of industries. We saw, what was it, a nail company. It's saying like, hey, you can't get the raw materials. It's not like you can't get nails that are made elsewhere. We're gonna sink. Like we're done. So that's gonna be an issue, and it doesn't take long for that to snowball. 2008 was hairy enough. And so like when we continue to just, shoot every single toe on the foot off, I mean, I can laugh about it now, but I don't.
Soon you can't balance anymore and you fall over.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, it's the same thing with like the housing market. Looking around for houses, and that's especially an issue here in Massachusetts, where the houses are just brutally expensive. There's been articles that are saying like, yeah, inventory. There's no inventory, but what is out there in terms of the housing market is just getting more and more expensive. And now housing starts are down, and it's more expensive to build new houses because the cost of lumber is up because of tariffs.
Cost of lumber, the cost of nails, the cost of everything.
And the labor pool is decimated because they're either hiding or they've left or they've been detained. Because you look around at who builds the houses, and it's a lot of very diverse backgrounds in those construction crews. So yeah, it's not just cars; it's a lot of different industries, and so I'm a little stressed out. And I think Harley is like the canary in the coal mine. Harley is taking action because they're a much smaller concern, and you're going to see the smaller ones go first. They're either going to make moves to protect themselves or to continue their business, or they're going to fold. And then
right, the big companies have a little more buffer to work with. Harley's been struggling a little bit anyway, so they can't afford to lose more sales, because of this kind of nonsense. Other bigger companies, they've got a little more time to play with. They can be a little more patient, but they're not going to be patient for very long. Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I've reached the edge of my expertise on tariffs, so I'm going to shut up now about it. But things are. I feel
once that ever stopped us before.
Yeah, that's true. I just feel like things are going to get more expensive. I mean, even the cost of fuel is up. We're quickly going to be in trouble. I don't know how that's going to end. I'm nervous. I'm snapping at people. I'm on edge all the time. It's great. So on that happy note. Did we have any feedback from anyone, or are we sort of have we confused everyone with our variable schedule enough that they don't?
I think we've confused them. I think there were one or two emails somewhere, but I don't have them handy. So we'll try to address those next week.
Yeah, we'll look for them. We'll actually find them and dig them up. But thanks for hanging out with us. I think we should wrap it up, and then we'll come back again and do another one next week, like we're supposed to.
All right, sounds good.
All right, thanks.
All right, bye.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say ahoy or land ho and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.